What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to EP09. Alright, so the 2023 New York Pro is officially in the history books, and this was a really exciting show, you guys. In 5th place, we had Eric Wood in his pro debut. In 4th place, we had Joe Seaman, who I predicted to be in the top 3, but he was just outside of that 3rd spot. Joe had a great showing here. In 3rd place, we had Veton, who was definitely a standout in this lineup and was not necessarily a competitor that many of us saw coming. In 2nd place, we had Stuart Sutherland, another great showing. And in 1st place, we have a new champion in the name of Tonio Burton. And the second Tonio came out during the night show, it just completely confirmed what we all expected the outcome to be. Tonio has the superior shape, the symmetry, his conditioning was absolutely spot on, and he never faded throughout any of the posing rounds whatsoever. He was the best bodybuilder on stage tonight. So in 5th place, we had Eric Wood. I think this was one competitor that I thought was going to do well. I did have him in my top 5, but I did not think he would have looked as good as he actually did in this lineup. I think he had the best front relax pose of the night, but the biggest thing that we can take away from this competition with Eric Wood is that we now know how superior of a shape Eric actually has now that we've seen him in a lineup. I think for when Eric actually filled out for this show, he looked like he was like 7 or 8 pounds heavier on stage. The legs looked bigger in the back shots, which is something he needed to work on. He looked a lot more proportional because of that. He maybe looked slightly spilled over or maybe had a slight film of water as compared to prejudging. I do think that he was a little bit sharper at prejudging, but overall, Eric should be very happy with his pro debut. So congrats to Eric Wood for a very successful debut here in New York. In 4th place, we had Joe Seaman, and I think Joe looked great in this lineup. I was expecting his overall size to carry him further up the placings in this competition, and it turns out that's exactly what happened. He also held on to that amount of detail from the back that I expected him to have, and in the back poses, he was really holding his own in this lineup, and Joe knew that too. During his individual routine, he was hitting a lot of back poses, which was playing directly to his strengths in this lineup. I did notice that Joe let his stomach go a couple of times during his individual routine especially, and I mentioned it before, Joe is the kind of competitor that genetically has that wider waist, so it was extremely important for him in particular to keep that midsection in check at all times. But again, in the poses, Joe's abs looked pretty good. So that's one thing that Joe could take away from this show, but with that being said, Joe brought his best package to date to a pro stage. So quite deservedly, Joe Seaman lands a 4th place spot here at the 2023 New York Pro. In 3rd place, we had Veton, and like I said earlier, I think most people underestimated this guy, partly because there wasn't many updates from him leading up to this show, but you could tell back at the Arnold Classic Brazil where he took 4th place how much potential Joseph actually has. He has a ton of muscle, he has great shape, he came in very well conditioned to this competition, and this definitely won't be the last that we see from Veton this competition season. So congrats to a top 3 finish here tonight. Now in 2nd place, we had Stuart Sutherland, which a lot of people out there had Stuart Sutherland coming in to potentially win this show. When Stu came out during the finals for his individual routine, to me, the first thing I noticed was that he looked a little bit spilled over. I think the legs looked a bit washed out compared to prejudging. There looked like there was less detail from the back than there was during prejudging as well. I think it was either that he was a bit spilled over or he ended up holding on to a film of water or something. He just didn't have that crisp look like he had during the prejudging. Maybe they tried to carb him up a bit too much to really push the muscle against the skin that much further, but unfortunately for Stu, it looks like they pushed it just a little bit too far this time. And it is a real balance for these guys to really nail it. But you gotta remember, this is only Stu's 2nd pro show that he's ever done before. It does take time to really figure out that peaking process so that it extends over the entire prejudging and again at finals. But overall, Stu looked great in this lineup. We'll see him again in California next week so he can have another shot at that Olympia qualification. Now, as for our champion, Tonio Burton, Tonio came out during the finals, I think even more improved than he was during the prejudging. Everything that we saw leading up to the show, the roundness, the fullness, the detail in his physique, he held on to every bit of that through prejudging and the finals and pulled out a pretty decisive victory here. And when you looked at Tonio in this lineup, he was actually the shortest guy in the top 6 by a pretty healthy margin. but the superior shape and conditioning was just too much for everybody else to compete with. But even aside from that, Tonio showed us a ton of measurable improvements from the last time he actually stepped on a pro stage, and like I said before, this is his first show ever competing with his coach Dylan Blum, and these guys absolutely nailed it at this show. So congrats to Tonio. He goes down in history as the 2023 New York Pro Champion, which is a very prestigious title to hold in the world of bodybuilding, and this is going to carry over a ton of momentum going into the Olympia. So I think it's safe to say we had a very exciting show in New York this year, and I think it was more exciting and more competitive than most people thought it would be. Because it's true, when you first looked at this lineup, there were no quote-unquote big names that were on the competitors list, and this is, after all, the New York Pro. It's the third biggest show in bodybuilding in the world. But I think after seeing how these guys really stacked up against each other and the level of muscularity and conditioning we saw out of our top 6 especially, this was a very solid competition, and this is going to be one to remember. So, I hope you guys really enjoyed all the contest coverage leading up to the show. I hope that you guys enjoyed my coverage of the show in particular. Next on the list is the Cali Pro next weekend. Stay tuned right here on EP09. I'll have all the updates for you guys right here. Anyway, that's it for me in this video, you guys. Thank you for tuning in to EP09. Be sure to like and subscribe.